26 at 7 p.m. Mr. Evans? Roll call.
Mr. Fox.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Here.
Mr. Kenkre.
Here.
Mr. Forster.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Ms. Chambers.
Here. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to go over our procedure. Mr. Green?
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by the Troy City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Applicants must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the approved agenda. When an item is called, the chairperson will verify that the applicant is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. If there is less than a full board, 7 members, present at a meeting, an applicant may request a postponement so his or her request can be heard by a full board. If there is no request for a postponement, the applicant will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the applicant makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairperson will open the public hearing. A person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairperson, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate the relationship to the property in question, i.e. next door neighbor, live behind the property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairperson. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairperson to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairperson will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Mr. Green. At this time, looking at the approval of the minutes from the May 19, 2026 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second, Mr. Green.
Is that to approve?
Yep.
Yes.
Motion to approve. Yeah.
Motion to approve.
Ready for roll call?
Ready for a roll call.
Mr. Forster.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Fox.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. Kenkre.
Yes.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes. Okay, moving on. Item number 4 on our agenda, approval of the agenda. Are there any objections to the agenda?
No.
No objections, so moving on. We don't have to do a roll call for that, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. My first time. Okay, moving on to item number 5, hearing of a case. Item A, 3550 Upton, Brad Van Domelin. Van Domelin. A variance request to allow a detached accessory structure shed to be located in the rear yard where the zoning rear
Front yard.
is, that should read side, front yard. shouldn't
It's
it?
correct in the digital packet and an updated, but in the original email it was not.
Right, so it should be front yard.
Right, and I have it displayed too. So yes, located in the front yard.
Okay.
Yep.
Front yard where the zoning ordinance requires a detached accessory structure to be located in the rear yard. That's zoning ordinance section 7.03B to A. At this time, Mr. Van Domelin, would you like to step to the podium? Or, I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, and at this time, I'll make a brief presentation, see if the board has any questions, and once we get through that, then the next step is to...
My apologies.
No problem.
Not a problem. And as the chair indicated, this is a request to have a shed located in a location where the ordinance doesn't allow it, in the front yard. I have a brief presentation here. This is an aerial overview of the neighborhood with property lines in yellow, and the subject property is outlined in red. Now here you've got Waddles and Adams. And I'll continue to zoom in more closer to the configuration of the neighborhood. You can see he's on a corner lot here at 3350. Now, there's the close-up. Now, he wants to put the shed right about there. So that's adjacent to this street here, right about here. And what I've tried to do with these blue lines, if you can see them, yes, we can in the back, is superimpose where the front yard boundary would be. So everything between these blue lines and the streets here is considered a front yard. So the ordinance requires them to be in the rear yard. Our interpretation would be the rear yard would be somewhere back here. So I'll continue. That's his site plan. This is an example. This is the shed he wants to put in, 7 feet tall, 9 feet 5 inches at the peak, 12 by 8 in area. And he's provided some additional photos of his backyard to simulate where the shed would go. And these are right out of the packet. So I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Ms. Eisenbacher.
Thank you. Is there a current variance for the fence?
Yes, there is.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Green.
Would any other variance be necessary, because this is going in the front yard, would any other setback variance or otherwise be necessary in order for the shed to be put in place? Or is the front yard allowance or variance?
The front yard is the only variance they need.
Thank you.
Mr. Cancree.
So where is the front door of this house?
I believe it's, here's the front door along.
Yes.
Okay, so right there.
Door right there under that.
Right. So that is the front door, but for the purpose of variance, we kind of consider everything like what you're shown in the blue, right? Outside of the blue is the front. For the purpose
Outside of the blue is the front, so
Right, okay.
because this is on a corner, it's got 2 front yards.
Okay.
Mr. Forrester.
And the height of the shed is 9 feet? Is that what you had?
I think the ultimate height at the peak was 9 feet 5 inches, 7 feet at the edge of the roof.
Do we know the height of the fence?
We could ask the applicant that.
Okay.
It appears to be 6 feet in the standard 6 feet, but we can ask the applicant to verify.
Any other, Mr., I'm sorry.
So just a question, is there any other setback variance that would be required to take the shed and just kind of slide it up to the northeast corner there, where the fence just kind of has like a little pocket? Would they be like too close to the property line or anything like that if it were to be moved up there?
Well, the ordinance requires 6 feet from the back property line and 10 feet from the house. I haven't done the
Gotcha.
math, but might be able to fit.
Right in the middle.
Sure, sure.
Any other questions? For Mr. Evans. Okay. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant forward.
Yes, good evening. This is my wife, Doreen. I'm Brad Van Domelen, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come before the board this evening to discuss our request for a variance due to the practical difficulties that our lot dimensions present. And I want to say thank you also to Mr. Evans for being so responsive to the process with me when I've had questions and needed additional information. My wife and I, we just moved into this property on Upton the end of May, and moved here from Shelby Township to be closer to 2 of our children and grandchildren that live right in the immediate area. And we purchased a house on Upton Drive. The house is, as you can see, a ranch house. It's on a slab and has a smaller 2-stall garage. And so we anticipated there was going to be a need for a shed to provide proper storage for our riding lawnmower, push lawnmower, snow blower, and other lawn tools. And when we were considering this particular neighborhood to purchase this home, we noticed that there were a number of other sheds throughout the neighborhood. And so we didn't really anticipate that there would be an issue to add one for our needs, because it already seemed like it would fit within the character of the neighborhood as is. And I know I did provide Mr. Evans some additional slides. I don't know if you want to, where you show those, but I would just give an idea of different sheds that are within the neighborhood, just kind of, there's, I think, 15 pictures that I took. So just a variety of sheds and kind of a variety of locations in different properties.
That's all 15.
Okay. So as I got into the permit process, I learned that we were faced with some additional challenges that maybe we didn't anticipate. That being on a corner lot with different setback requirements and having that double frontage issue, which I never considered that as an additional challenge. Because our yard, as you can see, is really kind of not a traditional rectangle or square. It's kind of really a trapezoid type shape. As an example, if you look at that northeast corner that's up there right now, from the northeast corner of the house to our lot line, it's only 19 feet, which is certainly much smaller than would be allowed under current ordinances. So our desired location for the shed, as you see there on that blue box, is really the only location that makes practical sense. And actually, there's one modification to the property. I don't know when it actually was modified, but the patio is not as represented there. It's actually, if you look at the drawing that I submitted, with the dimensions, it's more of a rectangular patio now. That is showing right there is 16 feet deep, 27 feet long. So the old patio was replaced at some point. So this location in the kind of what I consider to be the kind of the back south end of our backyard area is contained within the 6-foot fence, that kind of frames our backyard, and is also next to a rather large, tall evergreen tree that helps, shield that location from the only house that is behind us. So this location kind of puts that shed location as the farthest point away from the house next to us, from the windows that they have that are on the side of their house that overlook our backyard. And there are no homes across Sunridge Drive from us. It's a wooded area. That's, I believe, all part of that kennel that's in that location. So as I mentioned, the shed I felt would fit within the character of the neighborhood, as many other sheds already exist. We would also make sure that we do nice landscaping around the shed to make it look acceptable. So the shed really fits within the character. It's obviously not going to have any impact on light or air movement to any of our neighbors. It's not going to have obviously any impact on congestion of public streets, no public safety issues that I can think of. It certainly doesn't diminish the property value, and no impact on public health or safety. I have talked to all of our immediate neighbors about our request for this variance, and everybody has said yes, no problem, especially once I told them where we want to put it, because there was some confusion just with the language about being in the front yard, which most people, they don't consider that to be our front yard. So once I explained that, they kind of chuckled and said, we have no problem with where you want to put the shed. So with that, I'm happy to open up for any questions you have and appreciate your consideration of our request.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah,
Yes,
just
sir.
one. So what made you decide to put it where you're proposing to put it?
Well, I initially thought I'd put it in the far northeast corner, but when I realized what the setbacks were, there's no room for it. Because it needs to be 10 feet from the house and 6 feet, I think, from the side or rear property line. So pretty much anything you look at south of the patio, and there's no room. in basically half of what would be our backyard. So we have 2 8-foot sliders that overlook the patio, and really probably the only envelope where we could possibly put it would be literally, might fit right on the edge of the patio, on the south end of the patio, between the patio and the fence, which puts it in a very undesirable location, right next to a patio and looking right outside our sliders from the family room, and also would put it in direct view from our neighbor's house, where they have, I think, 3 windows on the side of their house, kind of towards the back of their house where the windows are, I think 2 upstairs and 1 downstairs. So that would put it right where they're looking outside their windows, to look at it, as opposed to that location, which is somewhat screened by the evergreen tree, and then also the majority of the shed, other than the top of the roof line, would be screened by the 6-foot fence. So that's kind of how we ended up with that area, is anyway, thinking it was the most practical area for the shed to be located.
Mr. Fox?
Yeah, well, first, I want to say welcome to Troy.
Thank you.
I also was able to convince my wife to move from Shelby Township to Troy, and she has very much enjoyed it. Just to confirm Mr. Forrester's question, I did take a scroll down to the drawing. You are 100% correct. There's no way to mathematically fit that shed in the northeast corner without also needing a variance, just a dimensional one, or a setback one, as opposed to the location one. So figured I would just state that for the record, like mathematically, that does appear to be very accurate.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Green?
Would you mind reading section E, point E? Please. Of your statement. Mostly for the record.
Yep, the proposed shed location will not unreasonably diminish established property value. As noted above, the shed will be located in the rear yard behind a 6-foot tall vinyl fence. So only the top portion of the shed's roof line will be visible over the fence. The shed will be located adjacent to a large evergreen tree that will shield much of the shed from the only adjacent residential property.
Thank you. And then follow-up unrelated. The photos that you provided, the 15-ish, were those all taken from the street or sidewalk?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Nope. Sorry.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fence, I think, is very important for this variance. As long as the fence is there, it won't be obtrusive or at all any sort of a problem for the neighborhood or a unsightly position for the shed. Would you be amicable to the variance having a requirement that you maintain the fence in its position?
Yes, I would have no problem with that. I just spent a lot of time patching holes in the fence from lawnmowers hitting the bottom of the fence. So yes, my intention is to maintain and keep the fence.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, at this time, I'm learning this, so this is my first meeting. I'm
Me
usually
too.
sitting over doing nothing.
For the record, he does things.
So at this time, no other questions for the applicant. You can be seated.
All right, thank you.
At this time, we'll look at opening the public hearing at this time.
Gotta use the hammer.
Yeah, she is. Public hearing is now open. Anybody that has comments or questions, please step forward. Seeing none, do we have any correspondence? Closing the public hearing, any correspondence?
Yes, we have one written piece of correspondence provided by the city from Thomas Cook, provided yesterday. It says, "Good afternoon. Since it is almost 3 p.m., the day before the hearing, I'll be brief. We fully support the request by our neighbor Brad to put a detached accessory structure shed behind the rear of his house inside the fenced area. Brad and his wife are new neighbors and have already done a number of improvements to their property and home that will only help the neighborhood improve our valuation. Please approve their request. Thanks, Tom and Sue Cook." They are at 2855 Bolingbrook Drive. They note that they're directly across from Brad's property. If you look at the map, if you go up to the plotting, It is across the street and maybe catty corner up one.
Thank you, Mr.
There.
Green.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to bring this back to the board. Any,
Close the public hearing.
can I already close it?
No, mine was public hearing, so.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing. I'd like to take this back to the board. Questions, concerns, comments, boards? Mr. Fox?
I mean, I was going to kick off with a motion, so if Mr. Green has a question, he might want to.
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is actually for the city. Is it possible for our motion to include a requirement that the front yard variance only permit the yard frontage on, what is it, Sunnybrook, the southerly street?
Well, if you make a motion to approve what's,
Sunridge, sorry.
yeah, if you make a motion to approve what is requested, even if it's conditioned, it's only for what's here. It doesn't
That's fine.
automatically extend to any future projects.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for the board that might have? Comments? Seeing no other comments, Mr. Fox?
I would like to make a motion that the variance request for, oh, the address isn't printed on there. Say that again. That the variance for 3550 Upton Drive be granted for the following reasons. The applicant has demonstrated that exceptional characteristics of the property for which the variance is sought make compliance with dimensional requirements substantially more difficult than would be the case for the great majority of properties in the same zoning district because of the unusual shape of the property, the frontage being extended along the west and south side of the building, as well as the fact that you cannot, without getting a setback variance, move the shed to a different location based on what we got there. Also, the characteristics which make compliance with the dimensional requirements difficult are related to the premises and not another location. The characteristics which make compliance with the requirements are not of a personal nature because it is related to the land, the shape of the property. The characteristics which make compliance difficult were not created by the current or previous owner. It is just the shape of the lot. And the proposed variance will not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located. As we've seen, we've got several pictures of other sheds and whatnot, as well as the 6-foot fence. And as a portion of the motion, as a condition of the motion, I would like to put forth that the fence remain maintained up to city standards for maintaining your property.
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Forrester. Mr. Evans, ready for a vote?
Yes.
Well, I think we can have discussion with the motion first. If there's anybody that wants to add any comment to that motion before we go to
I apologize. Any comments or questions regarding the motion? Mr. Eisenbacher?
For the record, I'd like to point out that the incredibly exceptional characteristic for this particular piece of property is I think they have more front yard to rear yard ratio than any other house in the city probably because of the acute angle of the corner it's on. And as was demonstrated through the examination of the map, it's virtually impossible to have a usable backyard and a shed without the variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Green?
Thank you. Further to that, I would like to commend the applicant on their excellent summation of their practical difficulty. Following the points provided, I fully agree and support the motion as presented. The characteristics are the space, the characteristic, and they're very unusual and unique to that particular property, as was noted. They're not of a personal nature, as was shown. There are 15 other odd sheds that are also nearby. It's a very common thing to want. It's not unique to the applicant in any way, not even to the very localized area. They were not created by the owner or previous owner. That is how that plot is. And it would not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located, as well evidenced both by the images, by the trees, the other projections, and by the already noted 6-foot fence, which will only show then 3 foot 5 inches mostly of gable. So I'll support the motion.
Mr.
This
Kenke?
is just a comment that it's a technicality that we're calling the two sides as a front, because if you look at it, it does not have a front door, there is no front porch, there are no flowers, things that you typically associate with what is the front. There is a big tree there, which is typically what you have, like a bushes on the side of the house. So I fully support the motion.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, at this time, Mr. Evans, go move to a vote.
This is a motion to approve, provided that the existing privacy fence be maintained. Mr. Kenke?
Yes.
Mr. Forster?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Variance is granted.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 6, communications. Any communications?
Before I forget, we do have one case for our August 18th meeting, so plan on attending then. That's the only communications I have.
August 8th,
18th.
18th, okay.
We do have one other piece of communication, but not from the city.
Oh, we do?
Yes, from Mr. Desmond.
Oh, yes. As I think is aware, Mr. Desmond has resigned. He's indicated his resignation in the email that you have in front of you. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Okay, any other communications? Seeing none, let's move on to miscellaneous business. Training presentation by the Assistant City Attorney.
So, before we get started with our training here, some things were added into this PowerPoint that are a little bit different from last year. And so instead of going over the slides where nothing's really significantly changed, I will.
Oh. Let's see what we have.
The one we have on our desktop is the old one as well. So.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I have the other one.
Just give us 1 second. Your guys' copy might be the previous version from our training last year. If that's the case, we'll make sure we circulate an updated copy.
I saw some changes.
Oh, okay, so maybe it was just the date was the only thing that was wrong on that one.
There is two versions were sent out, 2 versions are posted on the site. So I think that there is a current version available on the site. So
Okay,
yeah.
perfect, excellent. So as I had mentioned, instead of going over in great detail some of the slides that are similar from last year, I'd rather spend more time on some of the updates. So some of these slides may not get as much attention, but you'll always have it available to you should you need a refresher. So this slide, there's nothing that changed. It just talks about the creation of this board under the law and how this board is able to be in existence and some of the duties and things about the makeup of the board here. There's nothing that really changed in relation to this, so I don't believe I need to spend too much time. And similarly, the decisions that this board makes deal with non-use variances, interpretation of the ordinance, interpretation of the zoning map, appeals from administrative decisions, and use variances. So those are the 5 categories of things that could be brought before this board for this board to consider. This has not changed either. The voting requirements for a use variance need to have 2/3 of the members or 5 votes. That's even if we don't have a full board. It still does require that there be 5 votes, no matter how many, as long as we have a quorum, one way or the other, we need to get to 5 for a use variance. So variances in general, this hasn't really changed. This, again, is somebody asking to be special, to be held to a different standard, to get to do something that nobody else gets to do. So unfortunately, for you guys, your starting position when you get an application should be no. The ordinance says what the ordinance says. If we gave everybody an exception, then what's the point really of having an ordinance? So we need to make sure that we understand that and that we are upholding and keeping our ordinance strong. So when you get an application, if and until the applicant meets all of the elements, which we'll go over shortly, you need to start with the answer being no. Unfortunately, nobody likes to be the bad guy, nobody likes to say no, but that's why you guys get paid the big bucks here, because that is part of your responsibility here on this board, is to enforce and keep the city's ordinance relevant. So, specifically when we are dealing with dimensional variances like we had tonight, you will need to look at whether or not there's a practical difficulty. When you're considering whether or not there's a practical difficulty, there are a couple different factors, which are on the next slide. Rewind it just a few. There we go. So here's our elements, and what I actually want to do, if you guys are okay with it, is to be a little bit interactive, just to make sure that we all are kind of on the same page. So the first element that we're looking at is exceptional characteristics of the property make it more difficult than the great majority of the property in the same zoning district. So if you guys can, I just kind of was hoping maybe we could, as a group, come up with a few examples of something that we could think of that would constitute an exceptional characteristic. And I think the most easy one, yes, go ahead, Mr. Fox.
I'd like a triangle-shaped lot. So
Yes.
a lot with a shorter frontage, larger back property line.
Yes, very similar to what we heard tonight, where that property, the way it was shaped, is not very typical. So that's something that could be an exceptional characteristic. Can anybody else think of potentially something? Yes, Mr. Green?
Terrain, usually like extremely bumpy, hilly, a large dip at the back of the lot.
Yes, something unique about that property that is not very commonly seen in most Troy properties. That's a good example. Is there anybody else that can kind of think of another one? Yes, Chair?
Depth of the property compared to the others in the area.
Yes, if it's parceled off in a different way than the rest of the subdivision, that could also be an exceptional characteristic.
Water.
Yes, yes, if there's a easement or there's something on the property as well. Floodplains, yes, things like that. Those are all potentially exceptional characteristics. So seems like you guys have a pretty good understanding. I think some things that are not exceptional characteristics would be, if the property is just a typical property in that neighborhood, but they just want something, there's nothing very exceptional about those set of circumstances. So we need to be able to identify something that is exceptional about this specific property. Next, it's related to the physical premises. So with this element, when we're talking about related to the physical premises, it has to be something, and there's a slide on it. Yeah, we'll go to that one. Related to the premises. So this one can't be based on the neighboring property. So for instance, if we're talking about exceptional characteristics and it's something that is exceptional of the neighbor's property and isn't necessarily related to this property, we want to make sure that we're just looking at this property and this request and making sure that it's all connected to each other. So that is the second element. Yes, and then Mr. Evans has a good example.
She's presenting her excellent. I'm thinking of one that the board said this is not related. We had somebody come in and wanted a variance in the rear yard to put up a sunroom, and they said leaves kept falling in from the neighbor's house. And then the board correctly said, well, you're basing part of your practical difficulty on a condition of the neighbor's house and not your own property. So that's one thing that some of you might remember. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great example. So that's something that we really want to make sure that we are looking into on whether or not this specific variance request deals specifically and solely with the property that is subject to the application. The next element that we have is that it can't be related to a personal nature. This one I think sometimes can be hard because, for instance, if somebody's caring for an older family member and they want to bring them in and they want to get a ramp so that they can get this family member in and out of the house easily. Of course, that's what we want to be able to help them and to help them take care of their family member, but that is a personal, very personal, it has nothing to really do with the land at all in and of itself. It's their request to take care of their family member. And I think this one is sometimes hard to separate emotion from facts because people can come up with very compelling reasons why they should have this, and a lot of it can be very personal. And so obviously it's human nature and our nature certainly to want to help people out, but again, we kind of have to really understand that there's an ordinance in place for a reason, and we really need to honor that ordinance and respect it and really find that this request really doesn't have anything to do with their own hopes and wishes and desires, but more so it has to do with something specific to that property. The next one we have is that it's not self-created. So again, this could be an instance where somebody put up a fence, and the way that they put up that fence now kind of puts them in a little bit of a pickle for where they're going to put something else or something along those lines. And that's just a general example, but if it's something that they created themselves by doing some other action, then unfortunately that's something that they should have thought about kind of beforehand. And so it's really, they put themselves in that position. And we won't be able to help them out with that. They need to kind of go back to the drawing board and come up with something else because it's not anything that's dealing with specifically with that land and the uniqueness of the land. Instead, it's more of a position that they put themselves in. Yes?
To that, and this may not be exactly right, but what does this do for post hoc situations where they've already done it and they're coming and they're looking for a variance for the thing that they've done? Is that considered the hardship that they've created?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, that they should have had the wherewithal and the forethought to pull the correct permits or, consult with the city before doing these things. So unfortunately, it's one of those things where they're asking for forgiveness rather than for permission, and that's something that they put on themselves and created themselves. So that would be a self-created hardship that unfortunately.
So they basically have to rip it out, start over, come to us, do it again.
In the event that they needed a variance for it and they didn't get the variance ahead of time, and this board does not find that there's any compelling circumstances to grant the variance post, after the fact, then yes, if we were not give them a variance, they would have to uninstall the fence and either come into compliance or come in front of the board and seek a variance to come into compliance. Yes?
We have had that. I don't know if you were on the board at that point in time. We had a garage that was built too close to the property line.
Yep.
And it was a large garage, and we denied it, so he had to take the garage down. Wow. So from that standpoint, that's not out of the question to be able to say no, even though it's already built.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aren't there parameters in the building department when they apply for the permit? It goes to you, or it goes to the building department, and then his contractor just starts to build?
Well, typically, always, there's a zoning review.
That's right.
As part of the building permit application.
Okay.
So we do that on purpose so things don't get built on the spot.
So if they went ahead and built it, then they didn't pay attention, or no one?
Unpermitted work or whatever that might
Yeah.
be.
Permitted work, they didn't take due diligence, put it in the right spot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because you could do all the right stuff, but when you get home, you make different changes.
Yeah, and sometimes homeowners too kind of just want to tackle projects, and they may or may not realize that the city has the zoning ordinance and that it needs to be in compliance. And so, it could just be somebody who maybe wasn't fully aware that this is something that
An
needs.
amateur.
Yeah, yes, well said, an amateur, yeah. And it happens, and, not everybody is not immediately apparent to some people that that's something that is regulated by the city.
Yep. And I can think of a wild example. It wasn't in Troy. I used to work for a library out in Clinton and Macomb Township, and it was near the county library for Macomb County. And the county library was built out on Hall Road, and they had a book drop on the side of the building. They built the building, they'd done all the permitting, they literally built the entire building 90 degrees wrong. And so the book drop was on the wrong side of the building. They had to custom fit in the drive so that people could barely get in with the book, and they then had to block it up so that, like, literally, so sometimes professionals also, it happens, but
Yeah.
like, there you are. Yep.
Yeah. Mr. Fox?
Yeah. May I ask a question about the personal nature
Of course.
consideration? Are you aware of any examples of communities going out of their way to carve out a condition in the ordinance where it has to do with like ADA accessibility and things like that? I'm just thinking of an example. I know we have restrictions on like how thick a porch can be. But let's just say to meet, federal ADA requirements, the porch has to be a certain condition out. I guess to me, I feel like it would make more sense for us as a city to say, well, yeah, if you've got to comply with federal ADA requirements, you're a person in a wheelchair, we don't want you to have to buy a new home because you have a wheelchair. You know what I mean? Like, can we like carve out some kind of administrative discretion in those situations, or?
So actually, that's a really good question. And it obviously, there is a requirement that we do comply with federal law. So in the event that that actually was a relevant consideration, that would be included as part of our presentation and in our memo on exactly what the ADA requirement may or may not be and what obligations this board has to either grant or what discretion this board would have. So in the event that we do receive an application that appears to be of a personal nature, but there is some exchange between federal law and compliance with that, that would be included in the memorandum for this board so that this board could fully understand whether there's any discretion to or not, and so that's something that if and when it does come up, we would make sure that the board was well advised through a memorandum, through our presentation as well.
Yeah, I guess to maybe narrow my question or make it a little more specific, do you know of any examples of communities that have tried to prevent the person from even having to come to our board? Like have some kind of administrative process during the permitting process where they can say, maybe like the zoning administrator has discretion to say, yeah, you shouldn't have to buy a new house just because you got in a car accident, you can't walk anymore, you can't get in your porch. Like, are you aware of like, because to me, I feel like there is some administrative discretion that could potentially be carved out there, but yeah.
So I'm not aware of any communities that have specifically done this. However, I think it's a fair thing to say, for example, you had a car accident, you need a ramp for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
ADA, you need a ramp for 6 months. 6 months, okay.
That's a temporary structure. What if it's permanent?
Well,
Because otherwise you're
These are all
looking.
things that we consider
Yeah.
as from the administration side on a case-by-case basis, rather than just automatically saying, I mean, our answer could be, you have to go see the board, but let's look at the factors and all the, everything involved with it, because anything that they're gonna tell the board, they can tell us. So they might as well tell us first, and if we can offer a reasonable compromise, let's face it, as you know, zoning ordinances aren't written for every possible thing. And by purpose, we deliberately limit the appeals board power based on personal things. But life happens, and sometimes catastrophic things could happen, or federal requirements may override the city. So it's case-by-case basis. We definitely look at these in great detail before we would send them to you, because you're going to have these questions anyways if it's sent to you.
Sure.
Yeah. Does that help?
Comment? So the situation with respect to that, I think of is like a home that was built where the passages are not exactly amenable to navigating a wheelchair. And somebody is now in a wheelchair, going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of a person's life, but you're not really able to negotiate your wheelchair, say, around the passages in your kitchen, right? You obviously cannot go upstairs, and you're spending now most of your time on the first floor. So, and like especially when people are aging in place, people are not moving out anymore, and so I think that's something it's possible we could see in the future.
It is, you're right, and obviously, you know, it's Mr. Evans' job and mine to make sure that we're not running afoul to any federal laws and regulations as it relates to the ADA and things like that. So if that is a potential concern based on our review of the application and our discussions with the applicant, we'll make sure to have done our research ahead of time to inform the board on whether or not this is something we have discretion, whether or not we just have to grant it, or whether or not this doesn't matter whatsoever, and things along those lines. So we will definitely make sure that in the event that something comes up where there could be a federal law conflict, this board is well advised and feels comfortable proceeding with whatever the facts and circumstances may be. Any other questions or concerns on the self-created hardship? Or, well, that was of a personal nature. So this one's self-created, which is a little bit different, but yes?
Yeah, so specifically on both of those points, so of a personal nature and self-created, sort of to Mr. Fox's point, and to what you said, sometimes life happens, right? Sometimes catastrophic things happen. That is not of a personal nature, exactly, right? Like they didn't do it, and it's certainly, in most cases, right, without assigning blame, it's not self-created. So in that circumstance, case by case, that's what we do, right? But like, so would that be how that's assessed? Because of course we don't want to create a financial burden and an administrative burden for somebody who doesn't, just on the basis of their disability broadly, like writ large.
Yeah, like you said, it's a case-by-case basis. It may not be of a personal nature, and it may not be a self-created situation. So it just kind of depends on the facts of each of them. But I just find that oftentimes these are a little bit of the more difficult elements sometimes, because there can be a very emotional connection to it that makes it a little bit difficult to say no to, because it can be a very persuasive thing, and it could make a lot of sense for their specific situation and their specific circumstances. But unfortunately, because it's so personal, that's sometimes where it gets really difficult to have to say no, because it just doesn't satisfy the requirements and the elements that are required in order for this board to grant the variance. So I don't envy you guys for having to make those tough calls, but that's unfortunately a really important role and responsibility of this board to do that, to protect the city's ordinance, to protect the city property values, and things along those lines. So
And its citizens.
I don't envy you guys. I understand what I'm asking, and what I'm telling you guys is not easy, but that is what the ordinance requires, and that's what this board needs to kind of keep in mind. So based on these elements, we have the 5 elements that we've all gone over in a little bit of detail. What I've noticed when I was reviewing case law over the past year, so what I did is I just went onto the database and typed in ZBA and looked at which kind of cases are going in front of the courts in the past year. What's going on? What are some of these issues? What do we need to be aware of? And what I found was the biggest issue is the courts were having concerns with the boards not making enough of a factual basis in their motion and in their findings. They would just say, I'm going to grant this variance because all the elements are met. They don't mention what all the elements are, but more importantly, they don't apply the specific facts to the elements. So we now have all discussed all 5 elements that we have in this in these considerations. So we're looking at whether or not there's an exceptional characteristic, whether it's related to the physical premises, it's not of a personal nature, not created by the homeowner, and it won't be harmful to the public at large and others in the neighborhood. So those are our 5 elements. Anytime from going forward, and Mr. Fox, that was outstanding. That's all I could have hoped for and more. Mr. Fox started with the very first element, And he said it was exceptional because the way it's sized and the way that front area is. And he actually took the facts and explained why it was exceptional. And same with the each of the elements. So going forward, whether your motion is to approve or deny, I would like for this board to go through all 5 of the elements and discuss each one. And in order to approve, you have to find that all of these are satisfied. If you are going to deny it, you could find that some of the elements were satisfied, and you can even make that record. If you feel like they have shown some of the elements, you can make that part of the record. But then you can say, but unfortunately, this seems like it's based on a personal nature because this is very specific to the applicant and things along those lines, and plug in the facts. And so you could say, so for that reason, because all of the elements aren't satisfied, I move to deny the variance request. So going forward, just to protect ourselves and so that we don't have to have it sent back to do a redo, what it seems like the courts are really interested in is a discussion of each of the elements and then plugging in the facts to whether or not the element was or was not satisfied. So that's a little different, I think, than how we do them sometimes. Sometimes we just say no because, and then we kind of just pick out the 1 or 2 that aren't met. And sometimes we say yes and we kind of go through, but instead of applying the facts, we kind of just say there's exceptional characteristics, it's related to the property, and we kind of just cite the elements without plugging in the facts. So something going forward here to protect our rulings and our decisions from this board is really making sure that we're plugging in the facts and making a really strong record. So that way, in the event that there is an appeal, the court will have a lot of information to see what this board based its decision on, and it won't get sent back for us to potentially have to do a redo. Mr. Green?
On that,
Yeah.
hitting all 5 every time in the negative or for, in support of is not always going to be possible. Are you asking for us to go, despite the fact that this is not, that this is clearly a dimensional hardship, and despite the fact that this won't harm the area, we find that this is of a personal nature. Make sure that we're hitting all 5, regardless of positive or negative, in either a motion to deny or a motion to approve.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep, yes, so I just want to make sure, and it's okay if you find that they actually did meet some, but they didn't meet all of them, that's okay. You can mix it, you can mix and match here. At the end of the day, though, the only way we can ultimately come to the conclusion that we're going to grant it is if all of those 5 are a yes. If there's 4 that are yes and 1 that's a no, unfortunately, that means we cannot grant the variance because they have to satisfy each and every single one of these. And the alternative as well, if you weren't given enough information to be able to say one way or the other, then that's not a yes. And so unfortunately, if you can't confidently say yes to each and every single one of these, then we would not be able to grant the ordinance or grant the variation request.
No, but that would be a deny or a postpone.
Yes, either or, depending on what the board felt comfortable with and things like that. But yeah, it definitely couldn't be a yes if the board didn't feel comfortable and confident in saying yes to every single one of the elements. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So that was a really big thing that I just wanted to make sure, because it seemed to be a huge issue for the courts when they're reviewing the record. It seemed to be something that they struggled with because some boards were really just not giving the court a lot to review. Yes, and so it was difficult. So they would then send it back and say, make a record, give us some details here, fill it in, fill in the blanks here so we can figure out whether you did it right or wrong, or whatever the case may be. So we just want to ace that part of the test here and make sure that we're giving the court ample data and information when they are ultimately doing a review of what this board decided on each case. Yeah.
One of the things that's come up in front of this board several times, I think you've seen it, is properties that were built before the zoning ordinance existed, and that unfortunate situation where they followed the rules at the time, which are now different. Did you see anything in the case law with that?
Or a previous owner.
Yeah, those considerations, depending on, what they have currently. Obviously, they're grandfathered in because at the time that wasn't an issue. But unfortunately, going forward, any changes that they want to make, now we do have the ordinance in place, and those changes do have to be in compliance with the ordinance. However, it could, depending on, again, the very fact-specific, they could potentially meet all of the elements for a variance, depending on, again, that's something that maybe was created by 3 or 4 or 5 owners ago, way back when, that, is just something that was fine then, but it's not now. And so really it's just fact-specific on whether or not they would be able to satisfy those elements otherwise. But unfortunately, we do have our ordinance now, and just because what they did back then was fine doesn't necessarily mean that this board has to approve of whatever it is they may be asking for at this point if it doesn't comply with what our ordinance requires.
So case by case.
Yeah, really, that's, it's funny, when I was in law school, the biggest response my teachers would say, it depends. And it would drive me crazy because I was like a very black and white person. So like, is it yes or is it no? But a lot of times you find that there's this gray area, and that's kind of where you guys are, and you get to kind of look into these factors and determine whether or not they fit or not. But no 2 cases will be the same. And so there's lots of different factual considerations, which is why it's really important for us to make that good record and make sure we're stating out loud which facts we found to be compelling in reaching our decision one way or the other. So going forward, when we're considering each of these elements, there needs to be substantial evidence. So with that, it should be something that, is kind of verified. So when you're looking at this, if somebody comes up and says, I think that it'll probably make my property, in opposition of an application, I think it'll probably make my property values go down. That in and of itself, without maybe a little bit more, because obviously you are allowed to use your common sense, and if that does align with what your experiences, life experiences and common sense, then it could be considered substantial evidence. But if it kind of just seems like they're guessing and it doesn't really jive with your own experiences and common sense, then that might not quite rise to the level of substantial evidence. And it's important in your deliberations to kind of address that, so you can say, there was a neighbor who came up and indicated, as it relates to the last element on whether or not this will have an impact on the surrounding areas, they said they thought that it would make their property value go down. However, I'm not sure that that's supported by substantial evidence, because it doesn't seem to comport with, what I've heard or what I've seen or things along those lines. So it is okay, because sometimes the court wonders, especially in an appeal when there's 100 people who come up and say all of these things, and then you guys don't address whether or not you took any of that into consideration, then it's hard for a court to review what you guys decide, because from what they're seeing all of this stuff, and they don't realize that you did take that into consideration, but you didn't find that it was supported by substantial evidence. So it's just kind of important to address some of the opposing, if there is, or even in support of, if somebody says something in support. It's just kind of important for you to hold it to that substantial evidence standard on whether or not that's supported by common sense. The very last bullet point is if a reasonable person would accept that evidence as sufficient. So that is what the standard is that you're going to use when you're hearing all of these statements, whether it's for or against any of the elements. And then when you are doing your, you are doing your discussion prior to making a motion, you can say, I have heard from a few neighbors that this could potentially decrease their property value. However, based on my experience and my review of this, I'm not entirely sure that I believe that's supported by substantial evidence. So I don't, I don't think that it's a consideration in this application or, something along those lines. Just so that when a court comes to see this, they can understand exactly the thought process that was going on and how you guys analyzed each of the facts. The court will give you deference because you are all residents of the city of Troy, so you know the city of Troy better than a judge potentially, as long as they don't live in the city, but either way, that's kind of your job. So if you explain that, yeah, I heard this, but it's not very consistent, it doesn't seem to be supported by substantial evidence, then a judge will respect that and give that deference and do that. But if you just don't say one thing or another, then a judge really doesn't know. And then they're confused on, well, there's 100 people who all came up and said something, but the board did they listen? Did they not listen? How did they, process those kind of negative facts? And so that's why it's kind of important when you are doing your deliberations potentially prior to a motion being made, for you to address some of the evidence that you heard and whether you find that that evidence is supported by substantial evidence or whether maybe it's not quite consistent and supported by substantial evidence. Does that kind of make sense? Yes.
Yeah, so I think the explanation very clear, very straightforward. Thank you very much for putting it together. I think, and using today's application as an example, whenever I'm looking at the dimensional requirements, specifically in a situation where it's like a shed or an accessory structure, I get the packet and I'm reading it ahead of time, and it's like, the first thing I look for is, would this fit somewhere else? And I was curious if that was something that we could potentially, if staff would have the time or the availability to like slip in alternative, because like with the application today, my first thought was like, well, can't you just fit it like up there in that corner? But then as went through, mathed it out, it was like, okay, so it doesn't fit because of setback requirements and whatnot. I guess I was just curious in situations where it is a dimensional setback, if it would be. No, it's tricky because you can't exactly expect staff to like design something for somebody, so I do understand there's absolutely limits to what is possible. But yeah, it's tricky because like we can't like bust out a bunch of calculators and like rulers and like measure out, you know what I mean, to like figure out if something would fit somewhere else.
So we can't help.
Yeah, some kind of like, I don't know.
So really quick before Mr. Evans responds, it's not the job of this board, and really this board should steer clear completely of proposing alternatives. What this board is tasked with doing is considering the application before it, no more or no less. So if you do believe that there is a way that they could do it that would be in compliance, then that is something that you can indicate during your deliberations based on your own review of the file and what the evidence that you heard. You could make that clear in the deliberations that, looking at this, I can't say for certain, but it does appear that there's a way for this to be done that would be in compliance. Because that is also something, and it is the next slide, that the proposed variance must be minimum as necessary. And so with that, if there's a way that they can do the project without needing a variance, that's the most minimum way. And so that can be one of your findings of facts. But what I would not encourage this board to do is to give suggestions on how they can redo their project or other ways, because it just gets us a little bit of in a trick bag there when we start to kind of tell them how to do their project.
And this is on the night of the ZBA board. You could do it before, but not tonight.
Well, that's the point. It's not our job, it's not their job.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, and then Mr. Evans, did you want to add anything to that in response?
When I have pre-application meetings with people, sometimes they think something's absurd or needs a variance. We'll demonstrate, if you were to comply, put your shed where you think it could meet and show that you can't meet the setbacks, or you'd have a 4x, or whatever it might be. Show them with compliance how unreasonable it is compared to everyone else in the neighborhood. Rather than you just saying it's unreasonable, just show them. That's one tactic I suggest. But that, again, that's my job. You guys are,
Yeah.
yeah.
Also, one of the things too, if we go back to A, the exceptional characteristics of the property, just because it's an odd-shaped lot does not mean they can't comply.
Correct.
So give you an example, like the one tonight, that fit. That one did not, it was too small where they could not comply. If that lot was another 20 feet deeper, could they have still put this in the rear yard and met that, which would have been the minimal application to it? Then that's different.
Right.
So just because it's an odd-shaped lot doesn't automatically give it clearance to go through as far as that's
That's a
concerned.
good point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I think to your question though, I understand and appreciate and respect that you just want to be helpful and you just want, to do that. But that is not something that is part of this board's responsibilities to do, is to give them ideas or to fix it for them. You would just have to look at what it is as it is. Does it meet the 5 elements? Was there enough evidence? Is it the minimum possible deviation from the ordinance that we can authorize in this case. So I would just caution this board against coming up with alternative proposals to the applicant. It just puts us in a little bit of a precarious position, and it would not be a good thing for this board to do.
Would you call that an inappropriate thing for us to do?
Well, and there is a slide on it, later on. It goes outside the realm of this board's duties and responsibilities, and so we strongly urge that this board stay away from doing things like that, because then too, if they turn around and then they do that, but there was some other issue, and then Mr. Fox told me if I just did this one thing, but then, it could
Then I
kind
hit
of.
my sprinkler and now there's a,
Yeah, it could just create an issue if we're giving them alternatives, so that's not our job to do. If we deny the variance, it's up to them to come up with something that fits, or to come up with a plan B and come back before this board with something, a better idea.
I was just going to kind of agree with you. The onus is on the applicant to prove or disprove
Right, exactly.
what's needed, and when we ask questions, we can find that out. But I agree. We shouldn't be giving them ideas, because it's going to make it worse than was
Yeah.
before.
Yes, yep.
I'm just curious, so during the pre-application process, is there a discussion about alternatives if the preferred solution does not meet the zoning requirements?
Well, if I identify something rather evident that could allow them to comply, I would say, well, what if a board member asks, can't you move your shed over 5 feet? What will you tell them? Or whatever it might be. So I call it the Swiss cheese test. I try to poke as many holes in it as possible. One, to help them understand how the process works and your standards. And two, that if they think of things that they didn't think of before, to help put their best foot forward, strengthen their application. So that's what I do.
or save several $100s and turn around and walk out the door.
They may say, I don't think I have a very good chance, and they do that sometimes. They say, well, now that I understand these standards and what they mean, and how they're applied, I'll think of something different. That's happened. Sure.
I was going to say, because if they're coming to us, means we already should say no maybe, but we have to wait and see what they say, what they're capable of, and then you make your decision.
Exactly, yep. Yes, Mr. Green?
Actually,
Oh, was there somebody else who had their
Yep.
hand? Oh, go ahead.
yeah. So the slide you were on previously, the middle bullet is, the board may have to make credibility determinations if there are conflicting statements.
Yeah. That was kind of what I told you about if somebody comes up and says, maybe my property value is going to go down.
Yeah.
You may have to make that determination that that's probably not credible evidence.
The one time we had a bald-faced lie to us that was then refuted with evidence, and I'm thinking now that we're getting the artificial intelligence creating
Yeah.
pictures, I won't be surprised if we start to see some creative pictures at some point in time. We're relying on the public to have a counterpoint, but like many of our cases, people don't have a concern
Yeah.
to come.
Well, to that point, you're allowed to use your own common sense. So you don't have to leave that at the door when you walk into here. So if something that's presented to you doesn't align with, it doesn't align with what you believe to be true or your own experiences, you don't necessarily have to take that as evidence then if you have some concern. It's just important that you make sure to address that on the record. Especially in the event if it's a bold-faced lie, I would recommend being tactful about how you address that. Just say, I think it's as simple as that isn't consistent with my own knowledge of the area or what I know to be true. And so I don't believe that that's would qualify as substantial evidence, or I don't believe that, that is a factor that I should be considering in this case. So that it's gonna happen, like you said, and with AI, you always have to double and triple check because not everything that comes from there is true. So that's where it's important for you to, when you are hearing evidence from either in support of or against the application, for you to kind of balance that with how does that apply to what I already know to be true, and is there a disconnect there, or does that jive, and does that actually seem consistent with what I believe? Because that can determine how much credibility and how much weight you would like to give that evidence. So as long as you are making sure to discuss that on the record so that the court, when they're reviewing, can understand that you did consider that evidence, but it just, based on your own experience as a City of Troy resident on the Zoning Board of Appeals here, it just isn't consistent with your own understandings and things like that, then a court will definitely respect that finding. They just need to hear it. They need to have it on the record so that they can know that we did fully consider everything, and this is what matched, and this is what we found compelling, and this is what the evidence that we are going to be considering. And this evidence, we didn't find that it was substantial evidence. We didn't find that it was compelling, or that it complied with the standards. So that's kind of what you guys get to do: make some credibility calls, make some judgment calls on what are the facts, and do these facts fit the elements or not.
Be skeptical, be curious, do the work, show your work.
Yes, yep, exactly. That is very well said. So the next slide we have here is the variance conditions. Like you did tonight, you can grant a variance conditioned on something if this board thinks that that's appropriate. For instance, in this case, it was conditioned on them keeping the fence, because the fence then kind of blocks it out, so then the other neighbors aren't being affected by it. So this board is allowed to put in reasonable conditions that are related to the variance request, if they are necessary to prevent the public health, safety, and welfare, or ensure compatibility with surrounding land use and protect and preserve natural features. Yep.
I got a question. If we put a condition on it, let's use this as an example. They came to us tonight, they wanted a shed, but there was no fence. And we said, part of the conditions that we want for approval of this, we want some screening, we want some shrubs, some arborvitaes or something around there. So they're then required to put those in. If they don't put them in, then when it goes to get inspected, they won't pass an inspection.
Yeah, and so if you look at the last bullet, it does say a condition that the owner provide a landscape berm or to obstruct the view of a structure, or something along those lines.
Yeah, we won't issue a permit unless the conditions of the variance are clearly shown on the permit. So if they have landscaping, we need to see very specifically what they're putting in. So I can verify that it meets the conditions of the variance as part of the zoning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to verify it, so that way I didn't know how that all kind of worked.
Yeah, just keep in mind, the conditions do need to be reasonable, and when in doubt, it makes things a little neater, I think, to kind of just approve or deny. But there are certain circumstances, like tonight, where it made perfect sense to add that condition in. So I wouldn't say that I would say use conditions sparingly, where the circumstances warrant it. I wouldn't put a condition on every single one. It kind of just makes things, compliance verification and other things just a little bit tricky. But in like the case tonight where that was a very, very good condition, and it was very well justified, that's perfectly okay. So don't be afraid to use them, but also don't pepper them in every single approval either as well. If you can just approve the variance, that's a little bit neater, I think, for the applicant, for the city administration and things like that. But if a condition is warranted, then please feel free to do that.
So would you take that back, or maybe not you, but would you accept the rephrasing of that as essentially the KISS methodology? The same idea as only allowing the, like, granting the minimal allowance, right, like of a variance. So keep it simple, silly.
Yeah,
Don't-
yeah.
Like, if it doesn't need flourishes, don't.
Right, that's exactly right. If you can grant it without having to put conditions in place and you feel good about it, then do that. But if there's something that you feel you would feel a little more comfortable granting it if only, they had done this or that, then, and that's something too, prior to making a motion, you could discuss in your deliberations that say, I do have a concern that this might be unsightly potentially for the neighbor, but if they had a fence in this, in like they do in the pictures, and they maintained that fence, I think it would really help me with that concern. And so I'm wondering if any motion that we ultimately end up passing could have a condition in it, and then you can get some feedback from your friends here on the board, your co-members here, on if they think that's a good idea, or they might want to tweak that a little bit too, to say, well, maybe instead of requiring this, what if we did this? And it's something that you guys can really utilize during your deliberations. Because it's helpful to bolster and establish our record when you guys are, communicating with each other, telling each other what you found to be compelling, what you found to maybe not be compelling or accurate or factually correct. So that's all good stuff to do leading up to making that motion. So that way you guys can kind of get an idea and make your motion. It'll then, from kind of picking everybody's brain and getting all that discussion, it'll make your motion even more comprehensive because you will have heard from everyone in their thoughts, and they may have said something that you didn't initially think of that would actually fit very well in the motion. So don't be afraid to really use that deliberation period after the public hearing has closed to express your ideas, say what facts you believe and maybe didn't necessarily entirely believe, in some conditions you might feel comfortable with, and things along those lines. Yeah.
Actually, I have that as one of my points on my things I wanted to mention. Like tonight, Aaron, you made a, right off the bat, you knew, and I think we were all pretty much on the same page, but I like to hear from everybody first, because there are different things sometimes that other people bring to light. They may go, never thought about that, that's something new, something that out of my realm that I would have not have thought of, that might influence how we word the conditions or basically our motion for the most part. So I like to have everybody have the opportunity to talk first before we make a motion.
Yeah, and even as part of that discussion, you could say something like, I think, when it comes time to make a motion, I would make a motion to approve this because when we're looking at this element, I found this and this, and when we're looking at this element, I found this and this, and you can kind of go through what, ahead of time, what you would potentially want that motion to be without formally making that motion. So you can kind of walk the other members through where you're at on this application and what facts you think have been very compelling and relevant and what facts maybe aren't so compelling and relevant. So instead of making that motion from the jump, maybe just saying, if I were to make a motion, I think that my motion would be, and then spell it out there, and then gives others time to fill in. Maybe they might be like, yeah, but on that third element, you could also add this because I thought that this was really compelling, or, and you can have some very good discussion. And then when it comes time to make a motion, it's going to be the best motion that anyone's ever seen because it's going to be well thought out. Everyone's going to have had an opportunity to contribute to that motion. So that way, when we get there, it's going to be really strong. And I think it will be really good in the event that there's an appeal. I will feel very confident defending understanding it. So that'll be a good opportunity for you guys to utilize the deliberation period a little bit more to just kind of get each other's thoughts and opinions. Yep.
Throwing back to substantial, on substantial evidence, was it? It's like two slides ago. There, substantial evidence it was. This evening is a good example. We had no reason to particularly consider it because we actually had communication from a neighbor, and the homeowner's claim that, statement that this wouldn't impede anything in the neighborhood because the guy backs a dog park or a dog kennel is clearly supported by map evidence and whatever else. And again, we had the homeowner, the neighbor. But he also said, I've spoken with my neighbors and they all approve of this. They're not here, right? This isn't highly contentious, or they don't know that there's a ZBA this evening because they haven't paid attention to whatever got slipped in their door. But that doesn't mean that they don't oppose it. That also doesn't mean, other than it'd be hearsay, right? Like word that he says they said it's okay. Is that, can we consider that at that point?
So
or do
the
we,
third bullet point,
Yeah.
it says unsubstantiated or speculative public comment does not provide competent evidence to grant or deny. So in the event that with that hearsay where he said my neighbors don't mind, a little bit with that is again where we're using our common sense. If you, like the facts of this case, there was a fence up, the neighbors aren't gonna see it, and there was a letter from a neighbor. So applying all of those to, it would seem like that, you know, would jive. Yeah, that would be consistent. However, if it was something where somebody wanted to do this crazy, horrendous, hideous thing, and they were like, my neighbors probably think it's cool, but you're like, I don't know if that fits with my own common sense. Like, I wouldn't want my neighbor doing that, so I don't really know without having that neighbor here. Then you can just say, you know, I don't feel comfortable necessarily relying on that that recitation because there were no neighbors here to substantiate that, and it's just not consistent with what I would think a neighbor would want, and so I just don't feel comfortable relying on that statement here tonight as substantial evidence.
Thank you.
Yeah, so again, just kind of double check it against your own common sense on whether or not it all seems compatible, or if it just kind of makes you pause for a second, then you know, maybe it wouldn't be considered substantial evidence then at that point.
We are neighbors. That's part of the thing. Act that way. Go.
Yeah. So we just finished the slide on variance conditions. So the next couple slides here, motions on a variance, this is kind of where I had indicated, just make sure we're applying factual findings to each of the elements. These two cases that are cited there below, those were quotes that I took directly from a case that came out this year, where it said the finding of fact must be sufficiently detailed so that the court can separate the facts from the law. Conclusory findings are inadequate because the court needs to know the path taken through the conflicting evidence, the testimony adopted, the standards followed, and the reasoning used to reach each conclusion. So that is kind of what I've been trying to, that's the legalese way of what I've been kind of trying to communicate to this board, is that is what the court wants. The court wants to figure out, how did you get from A to B? How did you figure out that 1 + 1 = 2? Help us, guide us through how you got to where you got to, so that way they can review it. Otherwise, if they're not able to, then they're gonna send it back and we're gonna have to redo it. So it's better for us to just get it right on the first try. And then another one I took, the finding of fact must include as much of the facts as is necessary to disclose the steps by which the board reached its ultimate conclusion on each factual issue. These findings should be made at a level of specificity which will disclose to the reviewing court the choices made as between competing factual premises. So again, if one person says one thing and one person says another, you're gonna have to be the credibility experts here and determine which one is more consistent and which one you're going to adopt in reaching your ultimate conclusion. And if it's a coin toss and they both could be likely true, then the applicant probably hasn't met their burden because there's other conflicting evidence. And so again, the applicant is the one with the burden. They need to go above and beyond to prove everything that they're saying is true and that they are able to satisfy all these elements. So if there is conflicting evidence that does seem persuasive, then we should not be authorizing the variance. So throughout these, again, I just indicated, apply the facts, whether you grant or deny the variance, cite each element, apply the facts that either are for or against each of the elements. That way we have a complete record. And that is pretty much the biggest part of this training in a nutshell. We did give throughout the next couple slides instances where granting or denying and potentially some reasons in there, but also Mr. Evans and I came up with these templates. I think that you all should potentially have. They have all of the elements in here, so that way in case you accidentally forget, you can kind of look. So on the front, if you find that an element was met, you can kind of look, and we gave you a little bit of a cheat sheet here, but you'll notice in each of them underneath on that little bullet point, it says, apply the facts that support the conclusion. Apply the facts on this, apply the facts. So I just felt like the more times I put apply the facts, the better chance we'll have to remember to actually apply the facts to each of these elements. Yep.
Will this replace the templates that we already currently have on our packets?
So those are,
I think it's a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I first came on the board, I did not want to make a motion because I didn't know how to make a motion and to lay out the information the way we could possibly do it. So that at that point in time, that's when we looked at a template to give a guideline, especially for newer members, to be able to help them make motions.
So, and actually, this is a good starting point, but to make it easier, what I'd actually like to go through is and do one more tweak on this so that I can kind of just put the element in bolder and underline so that way you can see that element. So I do plan on just making one minor tweak to this, but the version you have here is our best up to date so far, and I just, I'm gonna take one more stab at it to make it really, really clear, really, really user friendly, so that way each of the elements are in bold, so that way you can kind of see what they are, and then I'll put gentle reminders that to each one we're applying the facts, and what kind of facts might be relevant too. I might give a couple different examples, although it wouldn't be a non-exhaustive list. There may be some other things like, you know, I can't anticipate every single scenario, but I may just give you a few examples as well that are listed, so that way this will be our cheat sheet going forward on making motions.
And if it's okay with everyone here, I can start including it in our, the digital agenda pack. I see thumbs up, is everybody nodding?
Please do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
I don't think we need to vote on this.
No, yeah, I think we're concurrence, yeah.
Okay.
Separate note, please update the monthly agenda packet in the Zoning Board of Appeals opening statement procedure section, paragraph 3. The sentence, in order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed, needs to be updated with the new language where it changes to 2/3 or 5 votes.
No, that's actually
right?
typical for, if it's dimensional variance, they need 4 no matter what.
Okay, I thought there was the new requirement.
But if it's the
Use variance is 5.
it's gotta be 5 out of, it's gotta be 5.
Got it.
Use variance.
Yeah.
Higher burden.
Yeah.
In addition,
And I'm sure if we have a use variance, we get a memo from legal counsel.
yeah. Because, dimensional variances seem to be, by and large, the primary items on our agenda that this board considers. So in between now and next month, Mr. Evans and I are going to work on this to make it the best version that you've ever seen. If there is anything just kind of based on this version that doesn't seem clear, or you do have some feedback for us on some changes, let Mr. Evans or myself know so that we can make sure, because we're going to try to make it as great as possible, but you all are going to be the ones that are using it. So if there is something that you think would be beneficial and make it easier for you when you're making a motion, please let us know so that we can make sure that that's included in our final draft. So that way everybody feels really comfortable making a motion and we have it all in one place that's very simple to easy to read, easy to apply. So we all feel very comfortable going forward making motions, no matter what that motion may be. Is that cool? Awesome. So I guess the next couple slides, we kind of just went through a little bit of examples on denying a variance and particular situations on when you may or may not want to do that. So we'll try to kind of incorporate some of those examples onto our little cheat sheet and transfer that over here. So that way you kind of have it all in one place and you're not needing to look at the PowerPoint, look at the cheat sheet, and dance all over the place. So that does bring us to use variances, which in these, again, not very common to come in front of this board, but they need to show first an unnecessary hardship, and then second, that they cannot reasonably use the property. The condition is unique, that they are going to make it it's going to be impossible to earn a reasonable return without an adjustment, that it's not detrimental to the adjacent land. There's sufficient capacity for this request based on, in a neighborhood if they want to do a commercial business. Is that something that the neighborhood could support or not support? And it wasn't something that was created by the applicant. Again, because we don't see these very often, Mr. Evans and I will make sure that we do have a memorandum so that this board can kind of understand the elements and understand what it's looking for. But this is something that could come before this board. And so throughout the next couple slides, I kind of detailed what each of those elements kind of looks like. But in the interest of not boring you or wasting your time, I won't necessarily go over that. But if it ever does come up, you may want to consult these as a refresher, and we'll also make sure we get you a memo on that as well. Site visits for a variance request, feel free to do that if you think it would be helpful in advance of the meeting. When you do that, make sure that you don't speak to the applicant when you go, aside from if you are going and and then they say, hey, what are you doing on my property? Make sure, you knock and make sure they're okay, or otherwise you just need to make sure you're not trespassing so you can observe what you can see from the street or the sidewalk, the public right of way. If you do actually want to see in the backyard, you could knock on the door, introduce yourself. But in today's day and age, I would just be careful with that. People sometimes, especially with what happened with the fake DTE worker in Rochester Hills and things like that. It's scary when people knock at your door and want to come onto your property. So if you think it would be helpful and you feel comfortable knocking and asking, otherwise just see what you can see from the street, and we'll have plenty of photos in the agenda packet as well. So I'll leave that up to you on what you feel comfortable doing, and also potentially what the applicant may or may not feel comfortable with, and we'll go from there.
And as part of signing the application, they agree to give you permission to enter the premises. So if it's important and they simply deny you entry, that could have an impact on how you view a case. Not that they denied you entry, but that maybe you're not as familiar as you'd like to be with the backyard.
Right, because you can't see it.
Right. Yes.
Also, one of the bullets you have up there is something that I brought up, are identification badges from the city.
Yep.
I know mine's older than old, and that it has a date on it, I think 2019 on it.
If anyone needs an updated one or wants one, just send me an email and I will arrange to have our
Because I don't have one.
HR people, and they'll take care of it. If you want a new picture, we can do that too. Maybe your old one doesn't,
Good. I encourage everybody to
my
have
old
one.
one has hair, so.
Yeah, so if that's something you need, Mr. Evans will be able to help you out with that. And then the other thing too is when you are doing your site visit, just make sure that you're going not with other members on the board, but just make your own observations. And then this is something that you would disclose to the rest of your colleagues or your rest of your teammates here during the deliberation period. Unless, you went and visited and you have a specific question, then you can tell the applicant, as you're aware, I was at your house yesterday and I saw this and this, and I just have a question, but then if you're going to be relying on your own personal observations to make, a decision about a fact, then make sure that everybody else has the benefit of that same information. So you can tell the board, you know, I went and I looked at this area where they want to have it, but actually there's like so many other places that they could have it from my perspective that would be in compliance. So I'm not sure that this is the minimum necessary, or whatever it may be that your observations were that you are actually going to be relying on when you're making the findings of facts and deciding on your motion. So that way everybody else can kind of have that benefit as well and take that into consideration, because it'll be a helpful piece of evidence for the whole group to have to take into consideration. So if you do site visit and there was something very compelling that you think that everybody should rely on and that you plan on relying yourself, just disclose that during the deliberations, so that way everybody has the benefit of that information. Is that cool? All right. So again, the next slide, on occasion, this board may be called on to do an interpretation of the zoning ordinance or the zoning map. Again, just like use variances, this isn't something that occurs very often, so if and when it does, we'll obviously make sure to have a great memorandum, and you can visit back to this slide, but I don't know that we really need to flesh that out at the meeting this evening. So administrative appeals is also something that this board might do. And it would be in an instance where a city representative potentially city administration has denied somebody's request and they are saying that the city administration got it wrong, then you could consider administrative appeals as well, which again, we don't see very often, but that is something that this board is also in charge of doing as well if it ever comes up. So deliberations and resolutions, we talked on this already, and I think we're going to be so much better at this going forward. During the meeting, before it gets to deliberations, again, you don't want to do any debates or discussions or negotiations with the applicant. Avoid redesigning the project to try and convince the applicant of alternatives. If presented with new information or material at the meeting and you feel like you need time to really review it, if it's very comprehensive and you just don't have enough time to fully digest what you're being given, then you could postpone it, table it, postpone it to another meeting so that you can take the time to sufficiently and adequately review everything that you're given to make the best decision in this case. The templates here, use the templates. They're going to be awesome soon. And they already are, but they're going to be even more awesome. And so apply the facts to each of them on why it is or is not met. Be clear and concise. It is acceptable to ask the person making the resolution to provide some clarification. During deliberations, again, as I indicated, it's okay to say why you will or will not approve the request. That's exactly what we want you to do, so that way everybody can think about that, and maybe you could change some people's minds, maybe you won't, but that way they are able to understand fully where you're coming from. And so it's very helpful for your colleagues to express some concerns that you have or things along those lines. And then lastly, give their body language, avoid frowns, gestures, sleeping, which I don't think would happen. And again, as the weigher of evidence and determiner of credibility, just be tactful about it. You know, you don't want to be disrespectful to somebody and say, you know, Mr. Jones came up here and said this. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That is a complete lie. Or, you know, you can just say that that's not consistent with your own beliefs, and you don't know that that's especially true. And so just be tactful when you are sorting through all the evidence on what you're choosing to rely on and what you're choosing to not rely on. Because you just want to be respectful to whoever gave that evidence. To them, it might seem very true. They may really believe that their property values will go down. So, you know, not everybody is intentionally trying to lie or mislead. They just might be mistaken. So just give them a little bit of grace in your deliberations if you're choosing not to believe what they say. Just be kind about how you are rejecting their statements when you are discussing it as a board. Next one. So anybody who is an aggrieved party of a decision made by this board has the right to appeal to the Oakland County Circuit Court. They can do that 21 days within the date that this board certifies the meeting minutes from the last meeting. So let's say last month we had something on the agenda and we denied it. Tonight, we approved that former agenda. So the 21 days would start from today. They could have 3 weeks to file that application if they believe that this board got it wrong.
Oh, so,
Those 2 months.
so they can't do it right after our decision? They have to wait till the minutes?
Yeah, the minutes have to be approved and certified before
Oh.
they're able to appeal.
So if we have like a 3 or 4 month period of no meetings,
Yeah, and especially with the Animal Control Appeal Board, that's something that
years.
that one does not meet nearly as regularly as this board does, so it can be a little while. I mean, obviously, if there's, we want to be fair to the applicant, so if it's going to be a few months, we may have a special meeting just to certify the minutes, or, if there's some other reason, we don't want to take away somebody's right to appeal. We obviously want to be very fair about that, so we wouldn't make them wait for an indefinite amount of time, and a very unreasonable amount of time. And with this board, we're lucky because maybe we only go, 2 months or so without seeing each other, but we usually meet somewhat regularly, so it won't be a huge issue.
Also do a pretty good job, and if I think the whole time I've been here,
one,
we've had one,
Yeah,
church.
Oh, one.
two.
Circuit court?
2.
It was the church, and then
I was here for one, and I wasn't here for the one before.
that's on the back of somebody's house.
Yep.
What?
yeah.
I don't remember
So
that.
keep up that great work from that.
So I don't know that one.
What's that?
I only know of the one that, since I've been on,
So they appealed it, and the circuit court denied their appeal, they thought they agreed with everything the board said, so you never heard about it again.
Yeah.
In other words, they didn't send it back to us to hear.
Yeah, we got a little notification paragraph from the city attorney at the next meeting that was like, hey, we're good, this happened.
Yep.
So are most of these appeals for approvals that they didn't like, or is it for
For denials.
rejections, denials mostly?
In your instances, the two that you recall, Paul, they were denials, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, mostly
Mostly.
it's going to be the applicant who's doing the appealing. It could be a neighbor, but if this board approves a variance, and a neighbor could be very, very
It's the
upset about it.
aggrieved,
Yeah, and so anybody who's aggrieved by the decision can do it, but typically in our case, we've seen it where the applicant has been the one.
That's why I've seen other communities too, the applicants denied, that's what people come and say, hey.
They're usually the most passionate, the applicant. Yes.
one of the things, because we've had the templates in the past, that we've read all of them and included all of them, that when it does get appealed,
Yep.
they have the information in front of them to make those decisions, so it shows support for them. So I think that's why we've been so successful
Yes.
when things have been appealed, is because they can sit there and look at, they denied it because of this, okay, they denied it because of this, they approved it because of this, that they could look at facts, not just say denied.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that information is crucial.
Yes.
in supporting these down the road.
And I think now more than ever, again, all the cases that I've pulled up that have been in front of the court over the past year, majority of them dealt with the court being very frustrated because there just wasn't enough on the record for the court to be able to determine, how did you get from A to Z? What path did you take and how did you get there? And it's not clear at all. Whereas with this board, I think this board does a great job, and we will definitely keep that going forward, so that way we'll keep doing great things here. So the next slide kind of talks about who an aggrieved person would be in the event of appeal. Like I said, the applicant would be aggrieved, potentially a neighbor, somebody who had participated, though. They had to have participated at some point, whether they voiced their objection or whatever the case may be. But
And staff vets, so we receive an application. Hold on. I'm confusing that with if somebody comes to the ZBA.
Yeah, okay.
Check that.
So next one just talks about who can appeal this board's decision to the circuit court. And then when the circuit court gets it, they're looking at it to make sure that it complies with the Constitution and the laws in Michigan, that it's based on proper procedure, and that it's supported by competent material and substantial evidence on the record. So the factual findings of the ZBA are entitled to deference. A judge isn't going to interrupt or disagree with your factual findings unless they're so ludicrous that it wouldn't make sense under any set of circumstances. But a court, under the requirements of the law, the court must give this board deference when you're making determinations of fact, because you guys are in the best position to kind of sort through that, being residents of Troy and on the ZBA here. So the circuit court, once it gets up there, those are the kind of the things they're looking at. They can affirm, reverse, or modify and send the decision back down to have a more complete record. So we do have our, for all of our boards, there's an ethics ordinance which was adopted in 2021. I know we discussed this at our last training. There hasn't been any changes to the ethics ordinance. So if it's been a little while since you've reviewed it, please feel free to go ahead and take a peek at that. I did outline in this slide just a few things that might be of note to you. If you'd like to review those, feel free to do that. And as always, if there's any questions on the city's ethics ordinance, please reach out. We'd be happy to chat with you. Conflicts of interest, in these instances, for conflicts of interest where you potentially have an interest in this case, such as the applicant being a friend or a neighbor, make sure that you're disclosing that to the board so there can be a determination on whether or not you need to have yourself recused from the matter. Any kind of personal interest in the decision, and just share that with the board. When in doubt, just disclose it, and the board can discuss and determine whether or not they believe it's an actual conflict or whether or not they do believe that you could serve on that. If there is ultimately determined that you do have a conflict, we will ask you to not be in the room during that hearing of that case, just because potentially, like if you're making happy or mad faces or any kind of things like that, the rest of the board may pick up on that and it could influence them. We don't want to have any influence whatsoever if there's any conflict or if you have any interest in the case. So if it's determined ultimately that you do have a conflict and the board does decide that you need to recuse yourself, we will ask that you step into the hallway for at least the hearing of that case. And then once that case is concluded, if there's any other items on the agenda, we'll have you come back in and be present for the rest of the agenda. Yes, Mr. Green.
This is half question, half hitting it again. I don't remember if it's council or any city employee or official, but we are to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, right? Is that council or ever? I mean, it should be us, right?
No.
But like, is that officially?
I think it's all boards. It's definitely something where if there's even an appearance, you'll
there
want
it
to
is. Yep.
disclose that, and then we can kind of, the board can kind of discuss it.
Yep.
And kind of decide whether or not that appearance, how minute or how big is that appearance, and kind of come to a conclusion together. But I think
But just err on the side of disclosure.
I think, yes, definitely err on the side of disclosure. And then after the disclosure is done, I think the board, with its collective wisdom, can kind of maybe ask some more questions. And then, and to the board, once it's deliberating and deciding, it's best for the board to err on the side of caution. If there's something that does kind of not sit well and you don't think that this person could be neutral, or it doesn't look like they could be neutral, then this board should ultimately end up voting to request that this person recuse themselves just for the purpose of that case.
One rule of thumb that I've learned from a different training by one of the civic organizations, if you have to ask,
Yep.
maybe you should just consider it a conflict.
Yep.
If your board has to be in a position to deliberate, maybe you should say, hey, I'm just not going to be here to avoid even the appearance. That one rule of thumb is a very conservative one, but maybe it's one you consider. That's just what I want to say.
Yeah, and I do think, when you're disclosing any potential conflict to the board, you can let them know, I think it would be best if I recused myself, but ultimately it's going to be up to the entire board to make that determination. So if you do recognize that there could be a potential conflict, but you do feel like you could still, I could see how it looks like a conflict. Personally, I do think that I could hear the case and I wouldn't have any prejudice or bias or anything, but I'll defer to the board. Just kind of let them know one way or the other, I think this is something where I should sit out, or I do think I could be on this, but if you guys disagree, that's fine too. So just when you're disclosing the exact relationship or the exact conflict, kind of just let your friends know here, yes, this isn't a good thing for me to be on, or no, and that way we have a good record, and everyone can be in agreement or disagreement, so that's something I'd recommend for potential conflicts. Yes?
What I've had a couple instances that things have come before our board that were things that I was involved with prior to this board. And if I looked at them, I said, this might be a conflict of interest because I was involved in part of the whole thing. I called in advance. I talked to council, I talked to Paul, said, is this a conflict of interest for me because I was involved in this aspect of it? And they basically guided me at that point in time, no, it's not, or yes, it is. So from that standpoint, to even reach out beforehand, if you see something on an agenda, find out if it is. But at that point in time, when the meeting came up, I disclosed that I was involved in that too, so that way it was there. But to find out in advance I wasn't surprised in the meeting. Other people weren't surprised. It was all kind of taken care of in advance.
Yeah, and that is an option. I think, if there is, though, sometimes if we have two cases on, then it would be better for you to show up so that way you could sit in on the second case if there is a conflict on the first one, as opposed to just not coming in at all, and then, not the applicant not having the benefit of a full board. It might, I think it's great to get ahead of it and to shout it out as soon as you recognize it. But unless it's a very glaring conflict, I would recommend still showing up and kind of letting your colleagues weigh in on that, especially if there's more than one item on the agenda, because you would be able to sit in and rule on the second item, which would be helpful to have a full board for that. So absolutely, if you do think there's one, reach out to us, and we can also provide some guidance on whether we think you should still show up or if this is something that we agree and there's no other items on the agenda. So instead of wasting your time sitting out in the hallway for an hour, just hang out at home and we'll see you next month. So yeah, just disclose to city administration, disclose to your board members. It may happen that you didn't initially realize there was a conflict, but one of the people that comes up in opposition could be your best friend and you didn't realize. So that does happen after the case has already been heard. So it's just as soon as you realize there's the conflict, make sure that you're disclosing that. It may not be beforehand, it may be at some point during the hearing. So just make sure that whenever it's discovered, it's disclosed so that the rest of the group can decide what the best course of action would be. Next slide, we have Open Meetings Act. Nothing has really changed with the Open Meetings Act. There's been no significant updates since we've met and discussed it last year. Essentially, under the Open Meetings Act, everything, anytime this board meets and there's a quorum, it needs to be open to the public. And we need to make sure that we're not having meetings without allowing the public to be involved. The biggest thing is doing a reply all in a group email with all the members, because that could technically be considered, there's a quorum there and that could be considered a meeting and some conversation amongst the board. So please try to refrain as much as you can from reply all. I know when our former chair, I'm blanking now, when he had submitted his resignation, I know there were some people that did reply all, just to thank him. It made me just my heart skip a beat just for a quick second, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that would have been a violation of the Open Meetings Act. But just be careful when you're hitting reply all. Maybe just reply to that one person and just say, you were such a great chair. I appreciate you so much. Wish you the best. That way it's super safe and we're not even making it look like it's anything. That's really my only point, I think, on Open Meetings Act.
This is the only thread that I participate
Yeah.
in where I only reply. Everything else from work and everything else is reply all. This is
Yes,
the only one where I
yeah,
reply.
yep. Just be careful about that reply all button, because it could put us in a little bit of a tricky situation under the Open Meetings Act. Next, under FOIA, as a public body, everything that we do is, any records and things like that, is the public is able to access that. So in the past, we have recommended that potentially you have a separate email address for your dealings here, because if for some reason a resident thinks that you're doing nefarious things and they submit a FOIA request and then we turn around and say that doesn't exist, then they challenge it in court. Potentially, that could open up your personal emails to a circuit court judge reviewing and going through to make sure that it in fact really does not exist. And I don't know if there's anything confidential or secret in your personal emails that you wouldn't want a circuit court judge seeing. So it's just if there's nothing in there and you're not worried about it, then that's up to you. But if you do want to keep the two things separate so that you never ever have to face the possibility of a circuit court judge going through your own personal emails, it wouldn't hurt to create a separate email just for your board responsibilities and your board correspondence. But I will defer to you guys on what you think would be the best in that situation. But essentially, any public writings or records, we do have to turn over pursuant to FOIA. Yes?
I may have asked about this in the past, but if I have, it's been a couple of years. Is that something, you're not at the IT, but is that something that the city would be willing to furnish to these board members? To just throw us an email account, each of us?
I don't know the answer to that question. I can look into that, yeah.
When I was joined, they suggested that I create my own email, and
same.
that's what I had.
Yeah, I mean,
So
sure.
why would we need anything else?
Well, so I'm not saying we need it separately. I'm saying if that's available, then that's an easy thing that the city could do to help them out. I'm in IT. I do IT all day long. I could create email accounts all day long. But that's an easy thing that the city could do to insulate that bubble and provide that for current and or future board members.
Yeah, I'll look into that and see and check into the logistics about that. In the event that that's not a possibility,
Sure.
Yahoo, Gmail, or all the other
Yahoo.
platforms. Oh, not Yahoo? Okay, not Yahoo. Okay, Gmail. I don't know. I don't want to advocate one way or the other, but I'm sure there's plenty of servers out there that you could utilize to just make a private email address for just this. But
I made my advance notice, I think probably not. We signed
That's
up
fine.
with everything before we access the system. Using a city mail means you're gonna access the system, and we have, I think, 19 boards and commissions. I think it's easier for IT to stay on top of who the employees are, because when a new employee is brought on board or they leave, there's a very specific procedure
Yep.
to make sure that the IT they're accessing is safe
Sure.
and properly separated when it needs to. So I think that's.
Completely understandable if the case. Yeah.
well, and the other
And there's
thing
also
too
cost.
is in IT, I'm sure you're aware, every year we have to go through that training on like spam and spoofing and all the other fancy words these days,
Yeah.
because having a city email
Sure.
address and potentially opening up the wrong thing could wreak havoc on the city's entire system.
Totally fair.
Yeah, so I don't know about that. I will look into it though, but like
Yeah, don't
Mr.
press
Evans
it,
said.
just curious, yeah.
And I will say too, though, for this board, as long as I've been on it and as long as I've been with the city, I've not been aware of any instances where any of your emails have been potentially relevant at all. So it's just one of those things out of abundance of caution. I'm putting it out there, but it's a very unlikely circumstance that you would ever
Yeah.
find yourself there. I think that's just about it. So that will conclude our presentation and training for 2026. I'm really excited. I think it was very beneficial for us to kind of go over that. I'm excited for our new template. I think you guys are going to continue to do a great job during the deliberations. Does anyone have any questions or concerns? No? Yes.
So just one quick question. And this is just related to, I got a letter in the mail, a neighbor of mine was applying for a variance through the Board of Building Codes, or is the Building Code Board of Appeals? So it's a separate board from us. And this might be a silly question, and if the answer is way too long, please let me know, but like, what difference would facilitate someone coming to us versus the Building Code Board of Appeals?
The Building Code Board of Appeals is appeals of the construction codes. And it's administration. We don't have jurisdiction over any of that.
Because like, I wanted to use lumber in this second floor wall, but we're required to use steel.
Yeah.
Thing.
All right, simply put, thank you.
Even a fence on a corner lot.
That's what it was about, was a fence, yeah, for my neighbors, so.
Yep.
Interesting.
The last thing, I think, before I'll turn it back over to the chair to conclude the meeting, if you guys have any feedback, one way or the other, on this template and what may or may not make it easier for you to use, what I plan to do is go through and kind of bold or underline what the element is, and then add some language in there about examples of where it would be met or wouldn't be met, so you can kind of pull from there, or kind of pull from your own set of facts based on whatever you hear. So those are the few tweaks that I plan to make between now and our meeting for next month. If there's anything else that you think of that would be helpful for you or for the rest of the panel, please let Mr. Evans or myself know, because we want this to be the best version. We want this to be helpful. We want everybody to feel comfortable making motions and make sure that we're making our motions as powerful as possible. So whatever we can do to facilitate that, please let us know. And with that being said, I think that's the end of my training, and I can turn it back over to the chair.
Any questions for City Council?
Nope, thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Moving on to public comment. Any public comment at this time?
No?
I'm going to use this quick second for myself. Okay, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes up here. Please bear with me. I'm going to get better as we go. A couple things that I've always shared with people, I want to share with you guys. When I talk about the ZBA and having been a part of this, I felt this board, I love this board in the sense that there's a diverse group of individuals up here that have different opinions and different insights to things, and I value each and every one of them. And because of that, I'm always willing to listen to what everybody has to say and take it into context, how that might fit and how that might work. So that's part of the respect that I have for everybody up here, and that's something that I want to make sure that we continue with, that we've done over the years. I think that's an important part of it. One of the things that I'll get better at is when we have an applicant or questions for Mr. Evans, directing all the questions through the chair, me recognizing them and calling on you to speak to either the applicant or Mr. Evans. So I'm learning my procedures a little bit. You see my notes from tonight, from a one agenda item, and there's nothing else from that regards other than how I'm looking at doing things procedurally a little bit. So those are two things I want to talk about. And the last thing is City Council meeting on the 27th of this month. They will be entertaining the language change that we had a resolution that we sent to the Planning Commission regarding the non-conforming lots and the setbacks for the garages, where they're at 3 feet right now, but our ordinances say 6. So we originally brought that up. Then Mr. Fox even brought up the fact, well, wait a minute, is there other areas other than this one area that was originally brought up? They went through and found all those lots that were there. So every lot in Troy that does not comply with the size and setbacks is included in that. So that way, those residents don't have to come to us for variances. So it saves them in some of these economically maybe not as affluent areas to help that fee for their application. So that language change is going to the City Council on the 27th. So I just want to let you guys know that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Well, no other public comments at 9:02. This meeting adjourned.